The second season of Andor returns us to the early years of the rebellion and beautifully continues the story from the first season. The series directly relates into the events of the subsequent movies and does an incredible job at recontextualizing the movie that started it all. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of the second season of Andor. I'm Brennan Sem of the New Wave Nerds. Joining me this week is recurring co-host Tory Sem. Make sure to like and subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Andor Season 2 continues the journey of Cassian Andor as he becomes a major figure in the Rebel Alliance. The series is created by Tony Gilroy and stars Diego Luna, Denise, Gough, Stellan Skarsgard, Kyle Soller, I don't know, Adria, Arjona, Elizabeth Dulau, and Genevieve O'Reilly. I think I missed a few people, but those are some of the important ones. Now, as always, we begin with a brief, non-spoiler review. Dad, what did you think?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed. Disappointed that we're not getting more.
Yeah.
You know, while I say that right off the bat, I feel that Tony Gilroy has earned our respect in the way that if he decides that 2 seasons is 2 seasons and that's the good story, I think I'll just go with that.
Yeah, sure.
But I would have loved a lot more to it. Definitely a great prequel to Rogue One, and of course, a prequel to the Star Wars that I know, right? The prequel to my Star Wars, I guess I would say. Much better than the prequel movies were that came out in the 2000s or whatever. Definitely a great film, a great. I mean, to me, it felt like, and we talked about it before with the first season, when we talked about the first season, how they broke it out so that we've got 3 episodes at a time being their own story arc. It felt like I was a kid getting a new Star Wars movie every week.
Yeah.
You know, so I really enjoyed that. Enjoyed the characters, enjoyed the storyline because it's all the things that me as an adult loves about the rebellion that I saw as a kid, right? So I don't know. I got nothing but praise.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's worthy successor to the first season. I do think in some aspects the first season is a little bit stronger, if for no other reason than the fact that it's just it's broken up into arcs, but it's a single contained narrative spreading only a month. Whereas this is a single arc in multiple different parts told over 4 years of time. Right. And so sometimes it feels a little weird just because it's like, there's stuff that I know I'm missing. But yeah, no, I mean, it's great storytelling. I love the way that it leads into Rogue One and of course subsequently A New Hope. After I finished the season, I immediately watched Rogue One and A New Hope, and that's like an ethereal experience. Yes. It is crazy fun to be able to watch the entire thing from start to finish.
It's definitely worth it. And I do love, and I don't know what kind of cachet there is to this, but I do love that it's Tony Gilroy who did Rogue One, right? And he's getting the people who were in Rogue One to come back for this, right? I mean, even people like Melshi.
Yeah.
And he appeared in season 1, right? And that sort of thing. But then he comes back here and he has a little bit more of a role to play. Even some of the people that are sitting around the table at the Rebel Alliance are from Rogue One as well, and stuff. And I thought that was a great way to give you that consistency so that, as soon as you can roll right into it. Now, I've been a little busy. So as soon as I got done, I watched about the first 20 minutes of Rogue One, and then I had to go back to work and wasn't paying attention to it.
It is, I will say, it's been 10 years just about. Next year will be 10 years since Rogue One. You can definitely tell it's been 10 years. Like, it's a little jarring to see Diego Luna's performance in Andor Season 2 and then go right into Rogue One. Not that he's bad.
I mean, he's had time to feel the character, right? Yeah. I imagine you do a character for, granted, this is only 2 seasons, but I know that there's been years in between, and you're kind of living that character, and I think that's the reason, as I mentioned, we're only getting a couple seasons, is because that production timeline is almost like movie timeline, right? And I know that that was one of the things. I'm sure that that's one of the things Tony Gilroy didn't want this to be his job forever.
Yeah, I mean, I
Acorn's
saw an
thing, but-
interview where he was like, "I'm just excited to be able to do something else."
I'm sure, which is sad for us. But I don't know. I would even argue maybe his brother, because his brother had a lot of production credits as well. I thought
Yeah.
at some point.
Dan.
Yeah, I mean, why can't? I bet we hand it off to him, and Tony and him can talk around Thanksgiving table, and then Dan can take over. But
Yeah, well, I mean, at the very least, I mean, you could, give it over to a slightly different team, still have maybe Tony Gilroy bust out the outline, the major beats, and then have somebody else actually write it and do all this stuff. But no, I agree. It is a little sad that we're not going to see more. In a perfect world, I would have liked to have gotten a third season and to have this second season just be the first 2 story arcs, and then the third season be the second 2 story arcs.
I think, yeah, when we'll talk about it, maybe it gets more into spoilers and stuff like that. But when you talk about those story arcs and the jumps between them, I feel like that's not necessarily just a time jump as much as, there's some content jump that we could have got out of that.
Definitely.
Right? So.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened in that time period, but I'm hoping that if nothing else, then we get some comic books, because I'm not ready to be done with Andor. He's such a cool character.
Oh, yeah.
I especially want to get some more information between those last 2 arcs in that year before. This isn't a spoiler because it's in a movie that happened 10 years ago. Before Andor heads to the Ring of Kafrene.
Right.
I want to see what's going on there, the beginning of the relationship with K2SO. I think it's ample opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Now, before we get into the spoiler section, I'm going to politely ask you all to head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. If you like what we do here and want to help us make these videos get even better, then that's a perfect place to go. We've got different tiers with different levels of rewards, and we're doing a patron drive right now where if we get 15 new patrons or $50 a month, which just about covers our podcast hosting fees, we're going to be releasing a 12-part series where we go over DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's going to be minimum a half of a day's worth of videos. It's going to be a lot there. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're really excited. But that's only going to happen if you head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. All right, let's get into the spoiler section here. So, sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, sorry, I heard you breathe.
Well, it happens regularly.
Well, for some of us, maybe. I do think, I mentioned in the non-spoiler section, I don't really like that there's such a big gap, because it feels like there is so much that happens in that year. Like, there's so much character development where I can't remember if it's between the second or third story arc or the first or second, but there are specific character moments where I'm like, wait, how did you get here?
Right.
Not physically, but how did your mind get to the point where you would do this? And I think that's a little unfortunate, and I do think in some ways it hurts the story. But again, minimal point. It succeeds in every facet.
It is. I think where what I was going to bring up as far as the time jumpiness, or the fact that we've got so much in one season, is in the first 3 episodes, the first story arc, Andor steals the TIE fighter.
It's a TIE Avenger, actually.
I saw that and I knew I was going to not know that.
I could be completely wrong. It's TIE something. I think it's
there's Avenger, there's Defender. I can't remember.
Interceptor too.
There's the ones with the 3 on Rebels, because you mentioned going in and watching Rogue One right after it. Right after episode 9, I flipped over and watched the Rebels episode with Mon Mothma, and stuff. So and they had the of course Thrawn's in that because it's in Rebels, right? So they had his experimental ties in there, But anyways, the thing that I felt was the most jarring in the fact that it was compressed down to one season is the first few episodes, he's got the TIE fighter, and then he actually lands on Yavin 4, and that's where the crazy rebel group is infighting and doing all this stuff. So you want to tell me that, now granted, I know that Star Wars planets, you always land exactly where you're supposed to be.
Sure.
Right? So maybe it's a different part of Yavin 4, but to me, I'm thinking, you're telling me that this rebel cell that's infighting constantly is not, and they were only there because they were abandoned or something like that, or they crashed. They're the ones who must move on to set up the base.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, kind of jarring. It didn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, there was that. I think it was the reveal at the end of the episode where you realize you're not just on some random planet.
Right.
It's how do you bridge the gap between this sort of ragtag group who doesn't have any food whatsoever, and get it to the base that we see it in? I think in the next arc.
I think so. Well, I mean, it's toward the because by the time Mon Mothma is there, obviously, but yeah, you're right, because when. At the end of that first 3 episodes, when he goes and saves Bix or whatever, episode 4, they're actually on Yavin 4, even though they're not. They're kind of separating themselves a little bit, right? I think that's where they're at. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, I'm a little unclear on that because it's weird. The whole relationship, the whole interplay between Andor and Bix and Luthen with the regular Rebel Alliance is really weird. And kind of confusing.
Well, and we've seen seeds of that. When we talked about in the first season, of course, and then with Rogue One with Saw Gerrera. I mean, we've seen in Rebels where they've kind of introduced that Saw is going off on his own, right, and that sort of thing. So there's definitely some of that. And I think that if you really sit back and look at it, the theme they're going for in this is the rebellion was not there until we get to all the stuff, the Gorman massacre and that sort of thing, and then Mon Mothma giving her speech, and then that kind of brings everyone together. And I feel like they kind of illustrate that even a little bit better in Rebels, the aftermath of her speech, bringing everyone together, and that kind of thing. Even though Saw, obviously, we see in Rogue One, he's still a little wackadoo, but when it comes down to it, I mean, maybe that's the theme of this season, whereas the theme of the first one was how does one man become or get to become a part of this, but the second season is that whole we've got these disparaging groups, but when we get down to it, if we work together, we can actually do something.
Right. It's how does this stochastic, maybe the right word, but like this guerrilla warfare, how do you have all of these different cells merged together to have one actionable thing that could actually take down the most powerful force in the universe? I think I don't know if we even see Yavin 4 in the second story arc, because at that point,
because they're in their apartment. That's right.
They're on Coruscant, and then after that is when episode 7 is when Bix and Cassian start living there.
Right, that's right.
It is weird. Saw Gerrera in this show is very, very weird, and which episode is it where we get Wilman is working with Saw?
Well, that's 4, right? I think is it right there? Yeah, in the thing there, and he goes in there. Yeah, and Saw's already got his paranoid stuff coming through a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
Well, but it's interesting here because you actually see that it's kind of founded, right? Because there's a spy within the group, and he's an Imperial spy, right?
I think that's what they're trying to give us. Either that or. And again, and maybe I watch too many spy shows, but is that true, or did that get planted on him so that Saw could kind of show off that I don't know. Right. I do think that what we're supposed to think is that, yes, he was an Imperial spy and Saw was correct.
That's right, because the guy he was asking about, he wanted to figure out what specific place they were going so that he could learn the proper rotations or variations or whatever.
Right.
That's right. But the part about that was really weird is like, maybe I'm missing something, maybe I forgot something, but the storyline between him and Wilman kind of feels like it doesn't really have like a resolution, because like Wilman, he gets the Rhydonium or whatever,
right?
And then he's got this interaction where Saw's just like breathing it in, just getting really high and being like, this is the thing, and he's like, take it, and eventually Will takes his mask off and like breathes it in. But then and it's like the end of the arc, right? Or the end of the episode.
And then Wilman shows up, and he is fine.
He's just on Yavin,
right?
Yeah.
That's where I thought for sure, and maybe the story arc could have been, and if you had this planned out in Rogue One, maybe we see Wilman in Saw's group, and Cassian gives him, So I mean, originally, and again, spoilers for Rogue One, they Saw kind of captures them, throws them in their little cell or whatever. I think that the natural arc to that may have been that Cassian shows up, Wilman's there in Saw's group because he's been doing this, and maybe we see either the downfall of Wilman, or Wilman helps him get out, or something like that, right? And maybe if they would have had that planned ahead of time, it would have been. But yeah, I'm on the same boat. I was like, okay, now he's part of Saw's group, but then all of a sudden he's right back where he was.
Yeah, he's just chilling on Yavin, living with them and everything, like doing missions with the Rebel Alliance. It was very weird. And yeah, I felt like if that were like the overarching plot and the plan from the beginning, it would work. But because obviously they didn't have this planned when they made that, I think if you want to make it work in this story, maybe you have it be the type of thing where it's like Willman is like, you know, the go-between them and Saw. Like, he's the one with the contact. He's the guy who puts Cassian in touch with Tivik, who is the guy he meets in the beginning of Rogue One. But yeah, no, it felt like it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, that was kind of a dangling thread, I think. And when you look at it, I think that, like you say, that may be the victim of we didn't plan this out that way to begin with in Rogue One, so we kind of got to run with it. So, because like you say, it could have been that, because, and that's the other thing, isn't the point of Rogue One that they need to find Jyn because she has the Saw connections and knows where Saw is at.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like and I didn't necessarily get to that specific section, or maybe it's just that she's the connection that can get him in. But if that's the case, why can't Willman do that? Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. What happens to him at the end of the series? But yeah, no, because once they get to Jedha in the movie, I know it because I read the movie and I read the comic adaptation for a review that's going live this Thursday. Oh man, now I forgot what the shameless plug.
I know, that was a great plug. I mean, it made me want to watch it.
They're in Jedha, right? Yeah, and they're talking about Saw, and Cassian is like, "Oh, we know where Saw is, but yeah, we're just hoping that you'll get us through the door."
Okay.
And there's a line where she's like, "Hope," and he's like, "Yeah, rebellions are built on hope." I do like that we sort of tied that back throughout like the whole series here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a nice plot point.
Yes, even though that is officially because Princess Leia says hope all the time.
Yeah, nobody has to know. She's secret at this point.
Well, she's a little girl, so
yeah. Well, at this point, she would have been doing Rebel.
That's right, because she's de-aged and shows up at the end of Rogue One.
Yeah,
so.
but there's also an episode in Rebels where the Gold Squadron has to like help her get some. I don't remember, like some Imperial arms to Alderaan or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I just feel the beginning, the reason that I think the first two story arcs should have been, and again, you know, I mean, he wants to do other stuff, I understand.
Sure.
But in a perfect world, the reason that the first two arcs should have been turned into just a whole season, I think, is because one, like you said, you can spend time building this up, and maybe this beginning, my second season would be like focusing in a little bit more on the interactions that happen between Saw Gerrera's group and the Rebel Alliance. You know, you can see this would be where you would see like Cassian sort of second guessing the work that he's doing with Luthen, right? Like, you're doing the right thing, but you're doing it in the craziest way possible.
Right.
You sow the seeds of dissent here. And then in the third season, Cassian decides, okay, I'm going to join the Rebel Alliance proper because there I can make a true difference or whatever.
Right.
And I think it would have worked much better. And then throughout the whole first season, the whole second season, the B plot would be the same as it is here. The Empire figuring out their plans of like what they're going to do with Gorman, right? And at the end of the last episode or whatever, you send Dedra to Gorman and whatever, so on and so forth happens. Or no, it would still have to be before that because the second story arc is with Cassian on Gorman.
Well, see, that's the thing though. If you spread it out to more seasons, you can get, you know, the every arc that we got, it was 1 year later, 2 years later, whatever, right? You can get all that filler in there then, right? And kind of make that some entertaining stuff. Now, like I say, if Tony Gilroy is the guy who wants to be done with this, I'm glad that the second half of the season, he finished that out. I would have hated for him to be done with it after this season. We got, you know, because I think I read somewhere they had originally 5 seasons planned, right? I can imagine a world where he's done after this season, and the next 3 seasons are somebody else, and it just doesn't live up.
Yeah.
You know, because the fact that I think the best part about this, like I said, in non-spoiler, I think I said then, was that the, you know, it wrapped up an a great continuation, a great lead in directly to Rogue One, right? and like you say, it just kind of flows in there other than age. But I think it's kind of nice that feeling just kind of moved right in there. And I think that if we would have stretched it out too far, maybe that might not have worked.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I do agree with that. I do wish in these first two arcs that we could have maybe, and this is going to be weird because I didn't expect to think this, spend a little bit more time with Dedra and Cyril.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were actually surprisingly interesting throughout this. I enjoyed their interplay, and once we get to start talking about the latter half, we'll talk about Dedra's fate and all this stuff. But it would have been really interesting to see them a little bit more and maybe build up the relationship between them,
right?
Because then at the end, it's a little bit more shocking when Cyril has his scene. It would have been interesting to have them build up this relationship where like Dedra, maybe Cyril's a tool to her. Maybe she really likes him, but Cyril is in love with Dedra.
Right.
Like it's there, and it would have been interesting to see that sort of asymmetrical relationship.
Yeah, as it is, I think the scene for that, or the episode for that, is the one with the mom coming over for dinner.
Yeah. Because
you see that right off the bat, because at the beginning of that episode, they're kind of standoffish with each other, right, and that sort of thing, and then but you see that even though that maybe that's just the way they are, right, because when it comes down to it, Dedra's defending him, shutting down the mom real quick, it was kind of fun, but yeah, I think that you're right, that became our shortcut for that, the short way of saying this is what their relationship is, and then you're right, it does kind of disappear from things. That relationship side of things just isn't a thing.
I do like, and this is something that I think it becomes more obvious in the latter half of the season, but it's pretty evident here in the beginning. I like that we do get like a look in this. I mean, this is in the first season as well, but I like that we get a look into what it's actually like to live life. That's a lot of L's as a member of the Empire, right? Because Cyril throughout this he'll become later sort of like the moral conscience of the Empire. Like he's the guy who's like, hey, what's going on? Like this is what we were doing here. This is kind of crazy.
Right.
He's the guy who's like, he believes in what they're doing in as much as he knows. He thinks that they're doing the right thing. He gives his life. And to sort of see his arc throughout this, I think is interesting. Because again, it's a type of thing where it's like any authoritarian, totalitarian regime, whether you're looking at Mussolini or Hitler or Stalin or whatever, the people who are like in the party, in the administration, lots of them actually do have like a deep love for their authoritarian regime because they don't know anything else.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting to see his character arc throughout this.
Yeah, and I think his character arc is interesting, all in that way, being part of the, I mean, he starts out being that way, right? His collar's always higher. In the first season, his collar's always higher than everyone else's. His suits are a little bit more tailored, and they fit him a little bit better. And then we get to the point where the payoff, I guess, for it, or maybe the tragicness of it, is that when it comes down to it, he finds Andor, which is what he's been looking for, since the first season, and then it's who are you, and then he gets killed off by somebody who he doesn't even see, and it shuts him down, right?
Yeah.
And all of that is after, like you're saying, he's getting. I feel like we're supposed to believe he got a little. He felt his disillusionment a little bit, right? He knew at the end is like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah. Okay, so the thing that's really interesting to me about Cyril is that, again, like you say in the beginning, I mean, the first introduction we have to him, he's in his office building, he's all buttoned up. It's like a regular, like low level sort of middle management job, and he's beaming with pride and he's introducing this new guy. And Dedra moves to Gorman, and so he moves with her too, though separately because they can't be seen together.
Right.
And he's like living out his dream part, basically. Like he's playing a direct role in the Empire's plans here. And what he thinks he's doing is he thinks he's like just getting involved with the rebels to sort of suss out if there is any outside agitators. And so he does the whole thing where he's like, I don't know if they've got anybody involved. I'll keep feeding him information. See, I'll get close to him. And then when he finds out what the Empire's actual plans are, where they're using him as he is the what's the word? Oh no. Anyways, he thinks he's looking for outside agitators, but he learns that he is the outside agitator,
right?
Who is again feeding them information to continue the Gorman insurgency, quote unquote,
right?
So that the Empire can justify like using force against them,
right,
in the event that'll be known as the Gorman massacre,
right? And
when that happens, when they're all gathered in the plaza, and he goes and confronts Dedra, that scene is crazy. I never liked. I mean, this is gonna be weird to say, and somebody's gonna clip this because he does put hands on this woman.
Right.
I had never liked Syril more than in that scene, because I was like, oh, this is a man with convictions.
Right.
He thought he was doing good for his country, and seeing what his actions have done, how it's been perverted, he's angry. And he's angry because the love of his life lied to him and used him. Oh, I thought it was so interesting.
It is, because you spend the whole, I mean, Tammy, like I said, she's watched a little bit of it, right? And every time she has caught some of it, she's been on and off with it. She's like, I don't like that guy, right? And that's the thing, is you don't.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to like him, of course, because he is this awkward dude who thinks he's all that, and that kind of thing. And then when it gets down to it, yeah, he's played that part perfectly. Mm-hmm. The actor playing that role has played it perfectly, because you feel a little sympathy there at the end, right?
Yeah.
And you feel where he's feeling it, or you feel how you would feel if that were the case.
Yeah. Well, and the scene that really, really nails that. So, he has this confrontation with Dedra. He leaves, and he's down in the plaza like when the massacre starts. In the scene of him just standing there while all of the carnage is happening around him, and him looking out, and like you see this look come over his face. That's when I really feel for him, where he's like, man, I didn't think this is what we were doing here. This is not what I wanted, right? Like I've sort of begun to like some of these Gorman people. I'm like taking part in the culture a little bit. That was really powerful.
Well, and then, and then it all gets capped off by him seeing Andor, and at that point you got to think he's thinking to himself, this is why I'm in this position, right? And up to a few days before that, maybe he thought that was a good, like he was moving up. He tells his mom how, he's proud of his position, like you say, and he's proud of what he's doing. But then as soon as by that point, he's realized that he's not happy, like what he's been doing is terrible. And then he sees Andor, who he probably figures is the thing that kicked this whole thing off. Right. Because I had this idea, and I knew this guy was going to, and look, here he's in the middle of all this thing too.
Yeah. You're the guy who ruined my life.
And yes, that's why I feel like that point where him and Andor are kind of tussling it up too, it just feels a little bit more raw, like he's going off a little bit, because at that point, yeah, it's all falling apart, and he can kind of point it back to this guy.
Yeah.
And then when Andor doesn't even know him, it's just got to be one of those things.
Well, and the interesting part about that scene to me is I didn't even think about that aspect of it. The fact that it's like he would recognize Cassian. For some reason, that didn't register in my head. I was focused on the fact that Cassian was there to assassinate Dedra. Right. He's got his scope trained on her right before Syril sees him and tackles him. And so in my head, I was like, oh man, this guy was just lied to and used and, made like an object for the Empire by his girlfriend, I guess. They're probably not married. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
His paramour.
We don't know about how the whole legal thing is.
Yeah. Do you think they have marriage in the... Not important. Well, they do, obviously, because we got the Chandrillan wedding. Anyways, That's a really weird sidebar. But even though he was just used by her, he still like leaps in and like protects her, stops her from being assassinated. Even, maybe there's a question of whether or not he actually knew like what Cassian was focusing on or whatever. But that was what I thought was really interesting to me. And that's the reason why I think like Syril does actually love her. Like there was that scene where I was like, oh, and then he dies for it. It was very interesting. And again, a character that I didn't expect to actually enjoy or care about or anything.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Certainly in the first season, you're just supposed to feel like he's a worm, right? You know, and that sort of thing. You're just not supposed to, in my opinion. I assume that's what that character is, right? That he is just the one that he's the slimy guy that we don't want to deal with, or he's just messing things up and always. I mean, he gets kicked out and has to go live with his mom, you know, all that stuff, right? It's just, we're just supposed to see this guy as a failure. And then, like you say, the second season, at least the first 7-8 episodes are building him up. Well, no, it wouldn't have been that. It wouldn't. First 4 or 5 episodes are building him up to the point where, yeah, it's a whole big thing. So.
Well, and I really like and this is a theme that has been in both seasons of this show. I really like the fact that unless you are like the top, again, it's playing on those themes of what actually happens in like authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. Unless you are the top of the top, the machine is going to chew you up and spit you out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care. Whoever you are, whether you're just some low level guy, Cyril, who made some mistakes, whether you are Dedra Miro, who is in charge of the whole Imperial operations on Gorman, it's going to chew you up and spit you out, and you'll either die or end up in prison.
Well, and she even feels like she is in control of it, right? I mean, I'm sure as an ISB agent, she thinks that she's got all this stuff in place and she's doing all these things. And yeah, like you say, here's somebody who thought that she was running the show. Maybe not because of her rank, but just because she knew everything that was going on. And even then, yeah, like you say, she's just dumped.
Yeah, she was like the de facto leader. Because, I mean, yeah, if you're in charge of the ISB, I mean, of this region or whatever, you got to imagine you do have the power to go to anybody, even if they are ranked higher than you, and be like, oh, you're a rebel spy, right. I think it's really, really interesting. And as much as I liked Cyril in this season, I really didn't like Dedra. I felt like in the opposite of what we got with Cyril, is like we actually got to see him sort of develop and change and like have his own emotional arc. Dedra didn't really get that ever.
No.
But it is obviously very satisfying to see her locked up in Narkina 5.
It is. Well, I do have to say, I saw one of the trivias that it's not Narkina 5, it's the girl version. Because they have the ladies in a separate thing, which I don't know what they do with the aliens who don't have
Narkina 6.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a fun thing to see that ending for her, because like you say, we're supposed to, and part of that too is because I think that if we're supposed to grow to like Cyril or have some empathy for him towards the end, we need to hate her then, because she did that to him, right? Now, granted, I'm following orders, I'm doing these things, but obviously she loves. You can tell that her character loves that control or that ISB-ness of it all.
Well, she's constantly searching for glory. Like that's what we see throughout this. I mean, that's the reason that she in the end of the first arc, episode 9, that's the reason why she goes alone to Luthen.
Right.
That's why she's there, because she's like, this is Axis. I've been going after this guy for 5 years, basically, at this point. I'm going to get him. And it obviously leads to, losing all of the evidence that they have. Really.
Right.
And it leads to, the loss of the Empire eventually. Right. All because of her pride and hubris. I think it's really interesting.
Yes, it is. And, before we get too far from Gorman, the one thing I liked about the whole Gorman massacre thing is, they
I hope somebody clips that.
What I love about the massacre,
my favorite part,
is the fact that the impetus for it, the bellboy, or the busboy in the hotel kind of brings it up, but the impetus for it is that Tarkin landed on some peaceful protesters, right? And that's why all that happened. Now that originated in an old Star Wars RPG tabletop game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a role-playing game out there, and that was in there in like a Rebel source book, one of those things that you can use to kind of build your world and stuff. And that story kind of originated in that, and then it got somewhat canonized, and then this whole thing became, and then, we got to Rebels, and of course, you don't even pay attention to it, or I didn't pay attention to it when I was watching Rebels the first time, the whole reason Mon Mothma gives her speech and that sort of thing. But it definitely is a big thing. And then I like the idea of the media's kind of playing together, right? You know, I know that we get, when Disney bought Lucas, some things were canon and some aren't. You know, some things got dumped off, but even then, I like that they still pulled in some of that canon and was able to make that fly. You know,
Yeah, I think that's really fun. I didn't realize that it's from an RPG. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that we actually got to see the event itself, because like you said, like in Rebels, the Gorman Massacre is something that we've heard about a lot and have
Right.
never actually gotten to know really what happens. And so to see it here is really, really cool and really powerful. And yeah, like again, another Rebels connection. Actually seeing Mon Mothma's speech in the Senate was so cool.
yeah, it was, because you can't. And like I said, I watched that. I flipped over that episode right after 9, and I found it's episode season 3, 18 or something of
Secret Cargo is what the episode's called.
Right.
Is it stupid that I remember that?
But it is fun, and it's fun when they show the clips of it and stuff. And like I said, when I was watching Rebels, I was watching Rebels from a different mindset, you know, just kind of enjoying Star Wars and that sort of thing, and didn't really sink in. But yeah, being able to get that whole thing and see the aspect of it, and that's part of the reason I love this, besides the fact that it is, you know, all rolling together. You know, we're getting all this stuff. Like I say, all of this stuff I consider great world building for what I knew as Star Wars, right? I mean, in when I knew Star Wars as a kid, is just the evil empire and the Rebel Alliance, right? And the good guys and the bad guys. But this whole thing, building that up, is pretty cool. And even before Andor, I enjoyed the and Rogue One and the Rebels and stuff. It's just kind of a fun way of pulling that all together. And now I think that they're doing a great job with, or the reason that this all works, I think, is because we've got, was Genevieve O'Reilly, isn't she? She's the voice as well, right? And, you know, and she's got that look, and she was in Rogue One, and I remember watching Rogue One. Oh yeah, that's a young Mon Mothma, you know, and that sort of thing. But it's great that they're pulling all that together and getting even like her assistant, right? Her assistant shows up in Rebels as the guy, right? And of course in Rebels, I don't know him from anybody else, but it's kind of fun to see that almost like a little arc there, because we find out that he's a Luthen plant in a way, you know, and that kind of thing. But it's one of those things where he's a plant, but yet he still is supportive of Mon Mothma. You know, I don't know. Just something about the way they tie all that together really feels cohesive and fun.
Yeah, it does such a good job of like the inner politicking and all of the espionage and stuff, and it's really, really fascinating. And Mon Mothma's story arc throughout this second season is really good. You know, I remember way back in our review for season 1, I mentioned I had 2 things that I really wanted for season 2. I wanted to see more Luthen and more Mon Mothma, and I got both of those in spades, and I'm very excited.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, Genevieve is great here. And I really love being able to see her sort of that the change, the super long change, because it happens over 4 years of her being like sort of tentatively involved in the Alliance, and then eventually having to take the leap to speak out against the Empire, and then witnessing like her first act of like seeing what the actual effect of rebellion is when Cassian saves her and kills people directly in front of her. It's really, really interesting.
Well, and I also like the way that that Genevieve O'Reilly plays it, the wedding, right? The wedding is kind of the thing for her. It's like, it's the, oh, what have I done kind of thing, right? Because I think in a way, isn't the arranged marriage, now granted her daughter wanted that kind of traditional thing, but Mon Mothma's getting something out of that arranged marriage because of the connection she's making. And then even in that wedding, you know, she's meeting up with the guy that obviously she knows, she kind of agrees, or Luthen forces it, but she kind of agrees he's got to go.
Yeah, take Colma.
So I mean, then we're starting to hit that whole is this a spy thing? You know, I don't, up to this point, she's just been a financier or whatever, throwing money at it and being able to support that way. But now it's getting a lot more direct, you know, and that kind of thing. And I just thought that was all interesting. And then, of course, the ending of that is her doing her just dancing, which just played on the fact that, you know, she's just in too deep. You know, it kind of got a Breaking Bad kind of thing out, you know, or the feeling of, you know, this has gone so far, and what have I done, and that kind of thing. But it's just too much.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, she's dealing. I mean, yeah. The last scene is her dancing. She's getting drunk because she has this interaction with her daughter, and her daughter's like, my mom never told me that it was up to me, and her daughter goes, "I wish you were drunk."
Right.
And she's like, everything is happening all at once. Things are falling apart. Things are getting crazy. Like you said, I'm in too deep, and so she just gets hammered and starts drinking. And so it's this really powerful image of her like. The last vestiges of like normalcy for her. It's when things start to heat up, and it's really interesting. And you mentioned Luthen. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Luthen for a minute. Now, throughout the whole season, his whole story arc is pretty much just him being like him also being overwhelmed, like Mon Mothma. He's like, there's the scene with him and Clea where he's like. There's too much going on, all the different lies we've told, all the bugs we've implanted, the seeds and all this. There's no way to keep track of what's going on. And he's like tired.
Right.
He's tired of it. And so his ending in episode 9, right?
Yes. Well, no, let's see. Did it start in 10? No,
I think it's 9 because we see flashbacks of Luthen in 9.
Okay.
I think that's because then
I couldn't remember. I do know, and before you get too far, we talked about wanting more Mon Mothma and more Luthen, and I did I think it was episode 10, which is, I'm tuning into 10, 11, 12 thinking I'm getting the finale of Andor.
Oh, no, you're right. Sorry. I meant 10 and I said 9 a bunch.
I think it is 10. And
stop.
Diego Luna is not even in 10.
Yeah.
I think episode 10, we don't see him at all. But yet I'm not missing him because we're getting that story that we wanted.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's really, really good. One quick note before we talk about his actual end. All this time we spent thinking that he's like, the ultimate spy, the ultimate M mastermind kind of guy. And his real name is Sergeant Lear. He just switches the letters around. Luthen Rail, Sergeant Lear.
How you hide in plain sight, right?
I mean, what was his regular name? Nathul? You know what I mean? Like, it didn't put much thought into it.
It makes it easier if you accidentally slip up and say your old name and say, "Oh, I got dyslexia."
That's funny. But anyways, I kind of want to come back to that flashback in a little bit because I do want to talk about Clea a little bit. But what did you think of Luthen, like, taking his own way out?
Well, and that when he meets up with Clea and they're outside and timeline's a little off, but when he meets up with her and he says, "I'm going to go take care of this," or "I'm going to go take care of the radio," and she says, "No, I can do it," and he says, "No, I'm going to." I think at that point, like you say, he's beat down. There's so many irons in the fire. I think he knows that's trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I think he knows he's signing off there.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't that the scene where he says, "I think we used up all the perfect" or something like that?
Yeah. I think it was, that statement, and it kind of got muddled together, but yeah. So I think at that point he's done. And I think that I don't know. I still like even when Dedra shows up and they're doing their little thing before she shows him the thing from season 1.
Yeah.
He's still trying to play it. Right. And I think it works out real well.
Yeah. Well, because, he knows that she knows.
Right.
And she doesn't probably know that he knows. Right. And so he's like, well, I'm just going to do this and see if she's going to reveal her hand or whatever. Right. And then she pulls the thing out and he just completely drops the facade.
Yeah, that's done. Right. At that point, you see it too. And it's great. I mean, Stellan Skarsgard is awesome.
Of course. Yeah.
I really love that whole plot line. And then, when he turns around and you don't even realize what he's done, and then he pulls out the knife. It's incredible.
Yeah. And then Dedra, the way that she reacts and she's like, "Get a med kit here." It's so fascinating. And I didn't expect to like Clea as much because, she had a minimal part in the first season. She was there, but she was very bland, I felt. But in this season, you really get the sense of like how she's almost, if not more important than Luthen is to the actual rebellion.
Right.
Like she's doing all of the communications and playing with the web and stuff like that.
Well, and you kind of get, and it's interesting. I think I saw it in one of the IMDb trivias, but that actress, like fresh out of acting school or something they mentioned.
Oh.
For the first season, and they just brought her in to be that bit assistant. But then Gilroy liked her, and that's when they started building on the character more. And I think, like you say, it works out good because you think about this in in other genres, you've got the the corporate genres or something like that. There's always the head up person, but it's always the assistant who's managing everything and really doing all the work, and that kind of, and it's kind of that same thing, I think. But and then to find out, that they played it off the fact that he's kind of raised her, right?
Yeah.
They've grown up, they've grown together like this. And then that scene, I think it's actually in Naboo where they're sitting in that restaurant and they blow up some stuff and quality stuff. But it is a great way for that character to go on. And again, I assume what we're supposed to expect is she's on Yavin 4, right? Like she joins the rebellion at that point. But I mean, like I say, it's too bad. Again, this is another character. When I talk about all the connections they do make, it's too bad that a while back they didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I mean, at some point, I mean, like, I guess, never mind. But yeah, I would definitely like to see, like, what does she do, right? Because, she's hesitant to come to Yavin because, they don't, the Alliance doesn't really like Luthen. Like, they don't really get along, and she's obviously indelibly tied to him. And so I would like to see, like, how does she adjust? Like, do they trust her enough to, like, actually let her play a role? Or is it sort of like, like she says, like a prisoner situation where she's just held captive because she knows too much or something?
It's definitely one of those things, and Cassian says it when he's in that conference room there towards the end, is all of this is because of Luthen, right? Even though Cassian has had his differences with Luthen and the methods and that sort of thing, it does come out. He's pointing that out. He's like, you guys are here because of that, because that built up this situation. So
yeah, it's really, really interesting. And well, and I do like the fact that once Cassian comes back to Coruscant to save Kleia, he knocks on the door and, there's some back and forth and she opens it and she just goes, of course it would be you.
Right.
That was such a good scene. Oh man. I loved their interactions. Actually, we didn't get to see those two play off of each other all that much.
Right.
But when they did, I felt like they had good chemistry.
Well, and and it's one of those things where it's like, at some point there's not necessarily sibling rivalry, but when you're an operative and the big boss man, he's a favorite, who's the favorite, that kind of thing. I mean, with Thanos and Gamora and Nebula, right? It's the same thing, but it's kind of similar to that. But you got to wonder if there was that bit to it, right?
So we're going to start wrapping things up here, but we do have to talk about the very last scene of the show itself with the lovely Bix Colleen standing on Mina Rao, the planet from the beginning, holding a young child in her arms. I gotta ask, what do you think are the odds that we see this baby in like Sean Levy's Starfighter movie? Because that's like Republic era. He'd be an adult by then.
Well,
Kong.
That's right. I guess I didn't. I just assumed we were looking at Poe Dameron. No.
Oh, that would be interesting.
No, there's definitely a little bit more of a time jump there. I don't think that's going to quite fly, but.
Fly, ha ha ha.
I wondered so that's the thing is, if we didn't know that Tony Gilroy was done, right? I wonder if that's the way that you then do the Andor show after Rogue One, right? If Cassian's gone, so now we've got something, and of course, again, we've got another time jump maybe to when he's a little bit older or something like that. I don't know. That would be one way you could take it, but maybe that's a little bit too on the nose.
I don't know. It Andor Child of the Rebellion.
I think it's probably just one of those things that is supposed to be the happy ending is the Andor line lives.
Yeah, well, it's as close as you can get when you know for a fact in like an hour of real world time the guy's gonna die.
Or maybe that's supposed to make even the ending to Rogue One just a little more tragic for us, or make his sacrifice even that much more noble, even though I don't know if he knows. Right.
I definitely don't think he knows he's got a kid. I mean, he knows that Bix is out there because she leaves him a message and is like, when this is over, call me up. I'll be there.
And he even brings up something like, I thought somebody asked him, are you going to find Bix? And he says, no, that we're going to wait on that or something. I feel like there's a statement he actually says on that. But
I think it's Vel. I think it's Mon Mothma's cousin.
That's
who asks
right.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's after he comes back with Kleia. And Mon Mothma tells Vel, there's a lot of names here. Mon Mothma tells Vel to go to Cassian to see if he believes what Kleia is saying, if the intel is actionable. I think that's the scene.
Right.
I could be wrong.
Because there is a mention, there's one more, because I almost wondered if maybe Bix was just a dangling thing we're just going to let go. Right. But then, I think the focus on that at the end, it's either more making Rogue One more tragic or more of a noble sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right?
They said before this series came out, they said that what Andor Season 2 was going to make you look at Cassian in a different light in the movie. And I think this is the scene that they were talking about.
Right.
I think, the rest of it, it adds context to the rebellion and to like getting the plans and all that. But as far as Cassian as an individual goes, I think this is really the only scene that does that.
And we talked about this as one of the potential pitfalls to the show was that kind of the point of Andor, Cassian, in Rogue One is that he has his growth in that movie, right? Because he just kills a guy just to get away in the beginning, which seems spy evil, I guess. I don't know.
Cold and heartless.
And then halfway through the thing, he's not going to kill Jin's dad, right? And that sort of thing. So I think that we were supposed to believe that was his growth. So as we discussed in season 1, if we've got a character here who has that growth in a movie, and then how do we run with that, right? And well, what are we really going to get out of Cassian because of that? Because he's already had that growth, and if anything, we're supposed to believe that he's still kind of a, I don't know, bad guy, spy guy. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, assassin.
I'm not saying I don't think that we. I don't know if we got. We didn't get growth from that aspect because it was in Rogue One, but I think that we got plenty out of Cassian. A lot of interesting character moments and stuff that I think made it worth it. So
Definitely.
The one thing I'll say too, to pivot off of that is if Tony's done, the fact that they introduce a child gives me hope that maybe in 15 years after he's done some other passion projects, he'll come back and we'll get the young Andor saga.
Well, I kind of hope, and I don't think the timeline is here, but it would be interesting to come back and do like another Andor, like a series, the same tone and style as Andor, but in the Resistance era, because I mean, how do you get the Resistance in the sequel trilogy? Like, how does it get to the point? Like, I don't know. It would be interesting to see.
I know that there's books obviously that have been out there, and I haven't read all of them. I've read some of the lead-ins to The Force Awakens and stuff. There's a couple novels that they've put out that are supposed to lead into that. But yeah, I feel like there's obviously a jump there in between Return of the Jedi and we still got issues. So yeah, is there a spy network to be had there, right? Or something like that? Or are we just talking about a military leadership? I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. We didn't even talk about him, but we're coming up on time, so we're going to do it really quickly. K2SO, great as always.
When they come back and they're playing cards, my immediate thought right then is, this is the season I wanted. I wanted more of that. Now, granted, I love Alan Tudyk no matter what, and I love that character, and I love the scene in Rogue One when Jin turns around and shoots him, and he's like, "Did you know that wasn't me?" And stuff. That great stuff. And then when you get the rescue and he's wandering in there and just knocking guys off the side of the bridge, I mean, that's good quality K2SO stuff. So.
It was great, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the build up in their relationship and friendship between him and Cassian. But the his origin here is so much better than what we had before. There was like a one-shot issue, the Cassian and K2SO special.
That's what I heard.
And that is dumb. It's bad. It doesn't work as like an origin for K2SO. The comic itself is bad, and it doesn't feel like Cassian. He feels like generic, like rebel spy. Like he doesn't talk like Cassian at all. I love the way that this operated, and he brings him along, and they repaired him and stuff. Just great stuff. I think it worked out great. I think so too. Yeah. So Rogue One, not what we're talking about. Andor Season 2, definitely worth the watch. Incredibly, incredibly good. What's the word? The phrase prestige TV. Prestige television, yes. Yes, by every definition of the word. Incredibly fun. It's on Disney Plus now. It just finished up. Go give it a watch. Comment down below and let us know what you thought. If you agree with us or if you think we're stupid. whatever.
Or if
Just
you
comment.
agree with us and we're stupid.
Yeah, that's also possible. Yes. Make sure that you subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Hit the bell so that you never miss another episode. And let's see, I will be back here Thursday to review the Rogue One comic adaptation. And I'll talk more about the Cassian and K2SO special. And then Tuesday, the summer of Superman begins at the New Wave Nerds. I'm talking about Superman the movie from 1978, one of my all-time favorites. I've literally been looking for an excuse to talk about this movie for 3 years.
Now, do you have the Donner cut?
I have it on the flash drive.
There you go.
But I didn't watch that for this. But yeah, so make sure that you don't miss those, because Superman's coming. Look up. Isn't that the phrase for the new movie?
Up and away.
In any case, I will see you guys on Thursday.